Could data centers decide the 2026 election? And Shannon Hardin breaks from the Columbus way. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Mike Thompson. 10 years ago, data centers were no big deal. It was actually kind of cool when Amazon and Google chose Central Ohio for a new facility. Then Senator Sherrod Brown welcomed them. Now, not so much. Brown has come out hard against data centers and labeled his opponent, Senator John Husted, the face of data centers. The National Republican Senatorial Committee warns data centers could decide the race. A memo first obtained by Axios reads, Ohio is one of the leaders in building these AI factories. Brown has made his opposition to them the centerpiece of his campaign against Husted. Brown is using it because it works. More than any other thing in this race, data centers are the anchor hanging around John Husted's neck. If he loses and data centers get the blame, politicians across the country will take notice and they will not go near the next one. So, will the data center issue, not the data centers themselves, will the issue decide this race and others? We turn to our panel, reporter Sarah Donaldson from Ohio Public Radio, Maria Bruno, director of the group Ohioans Against Extremism, and Terry Casey, Republican strategist. Sarah Donaldson, polls consistently show that affordability is the number one issue, but people more and more, campaigns, Republican campaigns it seems, are more and more worried about data centers.
So, couple things there. I think the tie is starting to happen between data centers and affordability. Candidates are saying, well, these data centers, and especially Sherrod Brown, are saying, well, these data centers are what is raising your electricity bills. And of course, major data center companies have to some point admitted that they are a huge part of the load that is being added to these utilities. But I certainly think that in a state like Ohio, where demographics have shifted and it's seen as more of a red state, Democrats have to find ways to peel off Republican voters, and there are Republican voters who are not happy about these data centers, just like there are Democratic voters who are not happy about these data centers.
But let's look at what Sherrod Brown said in 2015 in a press release welcoming what was then Central Ohio's third data center. He said, this new data center is great news for New Albany and Central Ohio. Amazon's growth in Central Ohio signals that this region is not only a great place to do business, but a place where people want to live and raise a family. I look forward to working to ensure that our region's burgeoning logistics hub continues to grow, creating good jobs for Ohioans and helping businesses prosper. So, Maria, how can he attack John Husted for being the face of data centers when he was the face of the infant data centers?
Yeah, I think that both parties have been slow to realize the potential harm of data centers. It's clearly an issue that's having political resonance, so it doesn't shock me that he's come out harder. I think that really speaks to why, these long-term tax breaks made without fully understanding the weight that they are actually going to carry is short-sighted. So, I think both parties have sort of talked out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to data centers. I think probably the Republicans have more than Democrats because the Republicans have actually been the ones signing those deals and making those arrangements. But I'm happy that there's been progression on that because I think it's a good time for both sides to again realize that Ohioans are not happy with this. Build it first and figure out what goes wrong later.
Those were the 40-year tax breaks that John Kasich signed when governor. Terry, why are Republicans getting all the blame when this was really a bipartisan welcoming committee 15 years ago?
Well, part of the purpose of this memo was to say to the industry, get off your you-know-what and sell the benefits, because whether it's labor unions building these, there's other tax benefits, as New Albany's done a great job on it. There's clearly benefits, and also for future medical research curing cancer. There's a lot of pluses to these data centers, but the industry has been slow to either sell the benefits or to stop doing some grievous things like these non-disclosure agreements and wanting too much. So I think across the nation it's changing. In fact, today's Wall Street Journal had a big headline on how, like in Texas and Pennsylvania, Governors have switched and said you've got to pay your own fare. And actually, Governor DeWine, John Husted, others have saying there needs to be more guardrails. We've learned a lot, and again, places like New Albany have done it well, and others need to pick up that.
So this memo, which was leaked, let's face it, the intended audience was not Republican operatives, it was data center tech companies.
Yes, they need to do their job of selling the benefits they bring, because they do bring benefits. There's obviously times when they've made mistakes like Hilliard in Dublin when they try and shoehorn a data center into an area too close to residential. So there's mistakes made, they need to fix it.
Can John Husted go on the offensive on data centers, Sarah?
I think it's tough. I've, asked John Husted about data centers for years now, and certainly as lieutenant governor, most politicians have posed in front of Google or Amazon or whatever data center expansion, but Husted has been a big supporter of AI expansion and data centers, and I think to completely go on the offensive would be a shift. But notably, he has adjusted his tone. I asked him a couple weeks ago if he was surprised to be made out as the face of data centers and surprised at this significant change in public opinion over the last 9 months. And he said exactly what Terry just told you, that these data center companies are doing a, quote, terrible job of selling the virtue of data centers.
Well, this week, OpenAI announced it was committed to building the data center in Piketon, an area of Ohio that really needs help. 35,000 construction jobs, 2,500 permanent jobs. And I didn't see one press release praising all these jobs coming to Ohio from any leader.
Yeah, I just think that it's hard to believe them right now. I think Ohioans are feeling really ripped off, and they're feeling specifically ripped off by corporations and billionaires. And so I think when the biggest beneficiaries, at least from the public's perspective, are these same corporations and billionaires, there's just a lot of hesitance to take them at their word.
Is this an example, Terry, of how they announced this, but it was sort of hidden in a financial thing? There might have been a press release from OpenAI, but there was no big news conference. There was no big celebration. Like, remember when Intel was announced? I mean, that was a huge deal. Everybody on the planet was there. Well, 35,000 jobs.
Well, the Piketon thing is huge because there isn't much else in a lot of parts of the state. So, I mean, that amount of money, the number of jobs is huge. But also because you've got a bunch of different entities involved in it, it's more complicated than just one company announcing it. So it'll come, it'll be big down there. But again, the industry's got to communicate to people, like if you're facing cancer, what you can do with the data centers, what you can do with the technologies to come. It's going to save a lot of lives.
And it's going to require as much power as it takes to power the entire state of Ohio.
Well, and I will note that expansion did get celebrated initially because it has a massive natural gas plant that's going in next to the data center. The plant is going to power the data center, and then the extra energy will go to residential consumers, which is more and more what you're hearing as a potential solution. But certainly, I saw some polling earlier this week that the only thing less popular right now than a data center is a data center and a natural gas plant together. So,
well, I went back and looked at the pictures from the groundbreaking of that center down there. Not one Ohio elected official in the picture. There was some federal folks. Mike DeWine never misses a groundbreaking, and he missed that one. So he must have known.
Even at Buc-ee's.
That's right. He was at that one. He might regret that one now. Anyway, debating your opponent was once a requirement for getting elected. Now, not so much. Convincing candidates to face each other unscripted is a tough sell. 2 years ago, Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno did not debate. 4 years ago, Governor DeWine did not debate his challenger, Nan Whaley. As Labor Day approaches, there is talk the candidates for U.S. Senate and governor might debate, but that's all it is right now, just talk. Maria Bruno, putting aside the public's benefit in seeing candidates debate, is there any political benefit anymore to debating?
You know, I think that anyone that's proud of the ideas that they believe in should welcome the opportunity to explain them to the voters that they're asking for their vote. So, I mean, if their agenda is hollow, then no, it's probably going to lead them putting their foot in their mouth. But I think voters are craving desperately authenticity, and they want to see your plan. So if you are ready to do both, show your plan and be authentic, I think there's a huge benefit to giving yourself a stage to do that.
Darlene Graham this week made a mistake, was asked about China and Taiwan. She says, I don't know much about foreign policy. It just blew up, immediately hurt her. We'll see how it turns out in the election, but that's not going to help the case for Ohioan candidates getting up there and debating.
Well, and there's some guy named Joe Biden that had a debate June
Yes, he did.
27th to 24, and it didn't work out very well. But the reality, having been involved in a lot of debate prep for Mike DeWine, John Kasich, playing Sherrod Brown, et cetera, it takes an incredible amount of time to get ready for these debates. And then when it's harder and harder to get together TV networks and get much viewership, the trade-offs, the benefits, they really don't match up. Plus, for a lot in the audience, how do you explain in 60 seconds your reactions and what you're going to change about the school foundation formula? Some of the questions for governor, senator are pretty complex. And also candidates on both sides are very good at memorizing little talking points and barbs. And do you really learn that much, or are they just reciting what they practiced?
That's where rulemaking and things like that comes into play. But are media organizations, Sarah, are they interested in sponsoring these anymore?
I think so, and I'm also still thinking about Terry Casey doing a Sherrod Brown impression, so that's in the back of my head. But I mean, certainly, I know, when I worked for NBC4, they were certainly, and Nexstar as a company was certainly interested in hosting these debates. But quite frankly, as candidates and as Americans become more and more siloed in their political parties, candidates are, I would say, even more combative about the format for the debate. They are, I saw this week that the League of Women Voters reached out to a local state house candidate, and more Republican candidates say they won't engage with the League of Women Voters. They see the League of Women Voters as biased, as liberal-leaning. Now, however you may feel about it, and of course they're not a media organization, less and less candidates are participating in these types of forums. Yeah. And certainly when you talk about going on live television, it's not just a local audience anymore. If you make a slip up, it might go national.
Yeah.
And also, before you can have a debate, you got to have debates about what the rules are going to be. And if you're a campaign manager for one side or the other, you just don't automatically agree to whatever they tell you the rules are, because there can be pitfalls, dangers if you don't stand up and protect your candidate accordingly.
I would argue that the benefit to the general public of being able to see these candidates both hold each other accountable and explain in their own words without their, manager whispering in their ears is a huge benefit to the voters. So I get that it's hard, but it's a huge benefit, and I don't think they should just skip it because it's difficult.
And one thing I might add, I don't want to make any predictions here, but just based on how responsive, specifically when we're talking about this gubernatorial race. I didn't cover the last one, but I did cover the 2024 election cycle. These two candidates are far less open to answering questions from the media than the last slate of candidates. They take typically 3 or 4 questions from media at every availability. That sometimes sends a sign about how likely they might be to go up on a stage and answer media questions.
Especially, Maria, in the governor's debate, that these are two very different personalities. I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy is just very gregarious. Amy Acton's more empathetic, more lower key. You can see how neither candidate would really want to be on the same stage with each other, because it might show some negatives. Yeah, well, show the contrast, which would be great, but you can see how that might play.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the reality is that debates are hard, but also, we've got two candidates that have never held public office. I think that there's a greater obligation to be expressing what they're going to do once they're in office, so that we're not all just guessing what they believe in.
And just a month ago, the plain dealer out of Cleveland tried to get both candidates for governor to answer 12 questions that were pretty important. Both sides said, no, we aren't going to respond. So both candidates, for different reasons, want to avoid getting too specific.
So they don't have to, right? I mean, Bernie Moreno and Sherrod Brown didn't, and that race went right down to the wire, 3-point race, and,
But when it's so close as it is right now, there's reasons who wants to roll the dice and risk a bad night or a bad question, because some occasionally in the media do gotcha questions or your favorite color, and some people say, not you, Mike, you wouldn't do that, but some others have, and people say, what kind of debate is that?
One person's gotcha question is another person's pointed hard question. Anyway, the Columbus Way, if it's not inscribed on granite at City Hall, it should be. The Harvard Business School famously held it up as a case study of political business cooperation. As Columbus City Council approved tax abatement after tax abatement with unanimous votes, the city did prosper. Now a man who's been a part of that is going rogue. City Council President Shannon Hardin announced this week he is running for mayor, challenging 3-term incumbent Andrew Ginther. Hardin says he has come to regret his role in the system.
I did not break that unwritten rule of Columbus, which is to work out disagreements quietly and behind closed doors. When I recognize a failure or a flaw, I work behind the scenes to fix it. This, I was told, was the responsible way, the Columbus way. I learned firsthand that you could get big things done as long as you did not challenge the system.
Casey, he's challenging the system now. Can a person who's been at city council for 12 years, been city council president for nearly 8 years, be the outsider to take on Andrew Ginther?
Well, he says he's the candidate of change, but the question is, what's he going to change that was wrong? He said it was too much secrecy, but what's he want to change it to? Because here's one of the dirty little secrets in Columbus at City Hall. Both Shannon and Andy have been spending too much money. The city auditors tried to warn them of some of these problems are not sustainable. So the question is, they both want to be mayor. What are they going to do differently, particularly as the budgets tighten down and the costs of union agreements get more expensive than what they can afford in the next 3 to 5 years. So we're going to fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be an interesting ride.
I know City Hall worries about the city budget. The average voter worries about the cost of rent, the cost of taxes. And Shannon Hardin is offering a different way. We don't know exactly what his policies are going to be, but he says he's going to move away from the big business and more towards the neighborhoods. Is that an effective strategy?
Look, again, I think back to what I said earlier, I think voters are really concerned that their politicians work for corporations and not for them. And so I think it is a smart move to differentiate himself by saying, I'm working for the people of this city and not for the corporations that often get the headlines and attention and favoritism, frankly. So I think it's smart. I hope that he means to be more actually democratic in how he's making these decisions and bringing more people into that process rather than these closed-door negotiations that we all as voters just find out about once the ink is dry. And so we'll see if that works out. But I think it's a smart move, and I do think it's a reflective of the change that you're seeing in voters. Really, we saw that the Ohio got the best state in the business, and then we saw all these other rankings come out that were worst or lower. So, business might be thriving, but how's everyone else doing?
From a reporter standpoint, even from just an average voter standpoint, there'll be a story to cover from a journalistic standpoint, and there'll be a choice to be made by voters. Where almost the past 20 years, none of the races have been that competitive for mayor.
Yeah, I think that's what is really notable, that if, this continues, there will be a legitimate choice. And, when people are voting for mayor versus when they're voting for their state lawmaker or for the president, they're probably looking around at their immediate surroundings. How often is my power going out? How high are my bills? And some of that is, of course, determined by utilities that are regulated statewide. But, what do my streets look like? When is my trash picked up?
When does the street get plowed?
Exactly. So, I think in that sense, although Hardin is painting himself as the outsider and he's running against an incumbent, and, you don't know how much of Hardin is a known quantity to voters because we know him, because we're in political circles. It's going to be interesting to see how much that has an impact on. It's also a question of how well Ginther has convinced people of what he has done over his last 3 terms.
Where are the Republicans, Terry? These are two Democrats. Where are the Republicans in this race?
Not sure that they'll be there. But the interesting thing is people don't realize for Columbus mayor, there's not a Democrat primary or Republican primary. And if 3 or more people, which I think will happen, there'll be a lot of people filing. So it'll be a very interesting May primary before the 2 top vote getters face each other in the fall. So for the media, it's almost like a double bonus. You could have 2 things to be talking a lot about.
But do we expect another bigger name to enter this race?
Could very well happen, because there's some other people realizing this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and both candidates have some baggage and some things they don't want to talk about, so that's an opportunity for somebody else to break through the pack, and that's happened in Cleveland and Cincinnati recently, where the first 1 or 2 people to announce weren't the winners.
We talk about statewide, there's no Democratic Socialist in Ohio like there is in Michigan and Florida, we saw last week. Is there a Democratic Socialist movement in Columbus that could put a candidate forward? I mean, Jesse Vogel took on the establishment and nearly won a city council race last year. That movement is there.
I don't know. I actually hadn't really heard any other names until this week, and now I've heard a handful of names floating around. So, I think we're at the early end of these announcements. I just frankly don't think that very many people are thinking about these things in terms of just that type of labeled ideology. I think people are really taking things issue by issue. So I don't know that there's going to be someone branded as DSA. Does someone who represents some of the same platform ideas, maybe.
Who does the business community want?
What
developers?
What
who do the developers want?
Well,
That's the key.
developers have put, when you look through the list in today's dispatch, $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 to people on both sides. They're kind of caught and confused because they've put a lot of money down on both of them, and now they're battling each other. But the business community, it's not the old days when we had the 5 Johns in Columbus, where we really had the power of the dispatch and the business community. It's a different world today. So I'm not sure the business community is going to take any leadership.
All right, sit out and see where the wind's blowing. Giving to both might be considered hedging their bets too. Yeah?
Or once they know who's going to win, then they bet.
All right. After weeks of uncertainty and anxiety, there is word that immigration authorities are detaining Haitian refugees in Springfield. The Haitian Support Center says 17 people have been detained in the city, which is home to more than 12,000 Haitian immigrants. Springfield's mayor says immigration's customs enforcement officers are active in the city. ICE declined to confirm any detentions. Legal temporary protective status for Haitians ended at the end of July. Sarah Donaldson, again, there's no mass arrest, but it seems like we saw a flight to Haiti this week from all around the country, first flight, deportation flight from the United States to Haiti. It seems like these detentions are starting.
Yeah, and I think this was to be expected no matter what government officials said, quite frankly, because these folks are no longer living here legally, and Republican lawmakers have made a point of that. I asked both Senator John Husted and Senator Bernie Moreno about this, and they said the law is the law, and, the Trump administration has changed the law on these folks, and they're no longer here legally. They're no longer able to work. And of course, there was a wonder if some folks might self-deport to some South American countries. I've asked different agencies if there's any proof of that and haven't quite seen that. But like you said, it's not this mass raid enforcement. It seems to be piece by piece.
The companies are starting to feel the effect because these folks lost their work permits when the first protective status went away.
Well, I work closely with a business manufacturing leader over there, and he's told me over the past year and a half that the changes have been evolving, and we forget TPS, the T stands for temporary. So everybody knew that this was not going to last forever, but it's been evolving, it's been changing. And interestingly, the good news for Springfield is they've had some major industry come in the last year, so there's a demand for workers. And interestingly, we should have seen—
Are they able to fill the jobs, though?
Well, that's part of the problem. And last week, Mike DeWine did an op-ed in the New York Times, which detailed we do need immigrants here to fill our labor force, and clearly we need Democrats and Republicans to come together because there is a need. There's a need to do it right. How do you fix it? That's part of the challenge.
Governor DeWine's been pretty vocal. I mean, I don't think he's in line with Trump administration on this, but do you think his vocal advocacy for these folks has slowed the process a bit?
It's hard to say. I know that I have heard more and more this week that each day has been progressively worse, and they do seem to be intensifying. I mean, these are people who the ground was moved underneath their feet. They were here legally. They were following the process. Many have had check-ins since that TPS expired and have, consensually come in to meet with these the immigration officers, and some are even wearing ankle monitors. Mm-hmm. So this is not a group that was trying to be difficult. This is a group whose the law changed while they were here. The situation at home has not gotten less dangerous, and now they're trying to figure out what to do.
Governor DeWine in that op-ed called on President Trump to do like a Nixon in China moment. He went after, made friends with a communist. He wants Trump to broker immigration reform package. What are the odds, Terry?
The odds between now and November are slim and none.
How about before he leaves office? Before Trump leaves office?
Who knows? I mean, what Nixon did was unusual, but at some point, America does have a labor force question and challenge.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots, and Terry, you go first.
I was going to first hit the national debt hitting $40 trillion, a new all-time record, but focus close to home. City Hall's got a big problem in the next 2 weeks deciding whether there's going to be a second competing ballot issue for the charter on the size and makeup of council. So we'll see how that works. And then how do they run a campaign if there's two issues? Do you say vote yes and then vote no, or vote no and then vote yes? There's a lot to be determined at City Hall.
Maria.
You know, I'm thinking a lot about how grateful I am for the faith communities in Ohio that have stood up to these immigrants as their, entire reality has been ripped up. So I just have been watching in admiration as these faith communities in Springfield respond to this, rise in deportations. And I'm glad that they are in our state.
Great. And Sarah.
Doesn't have a ton to do with government, but certainly sending my thoughts out to anyone who was affected by just the rounds of very severe weather in Ohio across the state, but certainly in several rural communities, a lot of flooding, a lot of damage. So,
yeah, good luck to them. Well, for longtime viewers, I sound like a broken record, or for you youngins, maybe a buffering Spotify stream. But once again, Americans are unable to see crucial legal matters in federal court. This week, it is the child safety and social media addiction trial of Meta. Last week, it was the guilty plea of the man who shot a healthcare CEO. Very important cases that we should be able to see if it were not for the ban on cameras in federal court. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. A reminder, check us out on YouTube. You can watch us on YouTube, unlike in federal court. Check out the WOSU News YouTube page. You can watch every episode on demand and share it. You can also watch us on demand at our website, wosu.org, and the PBS app. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.